Are we having a party here? I don't know.
Polishing profits. CBSE industry experts share strategies for growing a thriving cleaning company.
Welcome to Polishing Profits, and this is Mark Anderson. We have Sharon Cowan sitting there attentively looking and frozen. And Ed, you want to wave to the group? I always like you waving out of the janitorial closet, man. It's so official.
No, I'm in the closet here. So
yeah,
hello, everybody.
Don't come out. Okay, and with us today, we are really appreciative to have our guest, Dylan McGrath. He's a business advisor. He helps people do exit strategies. He does M&A and a number of things relative to our industry and the affiliated industries in the building service contracting and facility services. So Dylan, I'm going to give you the microphone and give us a few minutes about how you help companies expand, get in, get out, and all those good things about M&A or selling your company or buying one.
All right, sounds great. Yeah, thanks, Mark, for having me, and Ed and Sharon. Nice meeting both of you. Yeah, like Mark said, my name's Dylan McGrath. I specialize in business sales and acquisitions. I work kind of in that small to middle market, and I work primarily with service-related companies, typically doing anywhere between about 1 to 20 million a year in annual revenue. Like Mark had alluded to, I've sold a lot of different janitorial cleaning companies, other commercial type cleaning companies, whether it's companies who offer window washing, pressure washing, sandblasting. I've sold a number of property management companies, a fair number of contracting related companies, whether it's HVAC plumbing to electrical contractors to landscape maintenance companies, really kind of centered around whether it's a commercial office space or an industrial building or manufacturing facility. Anything kind of incorporated in that, any business that would be, kind of like I said, work around that type of property or that space, that industry, I'm very familiar with.
Awesome. What was your most recent acquisition or sale or purchase? What's the last project you just did you'd like to tell us about?
Sure. The last one we just closed about 3 weeks ago. It was, I guess you can call it more of a manufacturing business. Did water jet cutting, which I was not really even familiar with, but essentially They have a lot of really expensive, machinery that uses water and different technology to cut all different types of materials. So that was the one that we most recently closed. Yeah, to answer your question.
Great. So a lot of our audience is probably in one of two places. They're either looking to exit or they're looking to merge. Or I think the third one would be buy more companies. A lot of them are in the acquisition, particularly in the area you're in, the 1 to 5 million, 1 to 7 million. There's a lot of our audience that are actively looking to grow through acquisition. So as far as the building service contracting or janitorial industry, what advice would you have? Let's start with the people looking to purchase companies to grow through acquisition.
Yeah, my advice to them would be, obviously, if you're already in the industry, you know what things you should be looking for, right? Within your business, you look at, hey, what do I like about my business? What does a good account look like for me, right? If you're a janitorial cleaning company, for example, the really big kind of driving factor for the multiple on the selling end is going to be the recurring revenue component of, that particular business. And that's really why I work with a lot of these companies that have recurring revenue, is because I found that there's a demand for it nationwide, right? People want to buy that recurring revenue. On the buying end of things, having said that, the tricky thing is when you have a business like that that's very desirable, I guess my challenge is weigh in pretty heavily when I talk with a business owner who's considering selling, because I don't really want to go through my whole process just to test the waters, right? If someone has a good, profitable business, I really try to dig into, okay, so what is your motivation, right? If you've got a good business and it's running pretty streamlined and, it's making you good money and you don't hate, going into work every day, because maybe you're only investing 10 hours a week into oversight and you've got a good GM in place and a good team in place, why would you want to sell, right? So a seller really needs to be able to convince me that if they're going to engage with me in going down this road, that there is a true motivation to sell. This is kind of off topic, but I don't charge any kind of upfront fees, no monthly retainers, which a lot of other, advisors are going to charge. So for me, only earning a success fee, the business owner only pays me unless we're successful at bringing them a buyer with price and terms that they're actually going to be happy with, right? And so for me, I'm very incentivized to make sure that I'm working hard to make sure we bring a good buyer to the table and the seller's really in the driver's seat. I guess going back to your question, sorry, I kind of took that off track a little bit.
No worries, no worries.
So having said that, when we bring a good business to the market that's profitable, has recurring revenue, whether they offer a good product or a good service, primarily, like I said, I work in the service sector, you're going to have other competing buyers who are very interested in the same opportunity you're looking at. So I guess my advice would be, if you come across an opportunity, don't be one of those buyers who delays too long, right? If you inquire on the opportunity and, someone like me is the listing broker on it, don't drag your feet. If I send you some questions to answer, kind of preliminary vetting out questions as a buyer, right? That's what the seller's paying me to do, is to not waste their time bringing them just anyone and everyone who wants to talk to them, right? Initially, my goal is to kind of weed out and vet them out. Our process is that, right? Ed, if you inquired on one of my listings and I said, hey, thanks for your interest in this business opportunity, to kind of start the process before we jump into the NDA stage, can you please answer a few of these questions, right? To give us a better idea of whether or not you sound like the right fit and the business sounds like the right fit for what you're looking for, right? If you sit on that for a few days or whatever, 3-4 days, you may kind of be behind the 8 ball already. I think a good example of that is a business we just listed about 3 weeks ago. It's a commercial sign manufacturing company, and they also do commercial mailboxes, for large apartment complexes and HOA. So really good business. They don't really have much of a recurring revenue component, but they do have a lot of clients who give them repeat business. So once again, it's a good business. I knew going to the market with it that we would get a lot of interest, that we had, priced it competitively. And the first 2 inquiries we got, both ended up being really good candidates. We scheduled what we call a buyer-seller kind of introductory, call meeting, within 3 days of marketing the business for sale. And we got offers from both of those, buyers within 24 hours of having that call. So, and then we actually had a guy check in about 2 weeks later, a prospective buyer, and said, hey, is this business still available? And the answer is, hey, sorry, buddy, you kind of missed out, right? You dragged your feet. So my advice would be, if you're a buyer, you want something, especially within your industry, act on it quickly and determine whether or not it sounds like the right fit for you or not.
So, yeah, if it's a good deal, it's a good deal for anybody. So.
Yeah. From the standpoint of the seller, what advice would you have for business owners who maybe are thinking of selling 5, 6, 10 years down the road? At some point, everyone's going to leave their business. They either die, they sell it, they pass it on to kids, or it closes. So everybody leaves at a certain point. But say someone knows they want to sell, they're not ready now. What kinds of things can they be doing in their business to prepare for that day when they are ready to sell?
Sure. Great question, Sharon. A few things come to mind. These are things that I always share with sellers. Sometimes people contact me in that exact same scenario, right? Hey, Dylan, thanks for reaching out. Or, my CPA or my business attorney or financial advisor said, as we kind of look to the future, we should start looking, talk with someone like you to give us an idea of things we could be implementing now to make the business more sellable, right, in 2 or 3 or 5 years, whatever that looks like. And my advice to them is, I really always have at least 2, maybe there's 3 things. I'll just kind of talk through them. The first thing is, and this is a difficult one, but try to remove yourself from the business as much as you can, right? So if you're a service-related company, for example, especially if like a janitorial cleaning company, right? Someone's got to be out there doing the sales, doing the estimates, interfacing with the prospective clients or the current clients. If you don't have another one or two or three, the more the better, right? Employees who are capable of giving an estimate and kind of onboarding a new client. If that's all on you and you are the face of business, try to make that not be the case, right? Try to gradually, and if that's where you are currently, and you're the one, all the customers contact you when there's a problem, right? Because you're the person they've known for, 10, 15, 20 years. Try to come up with a strategy of, hey, maybe next time there's an issue and I get an email, right? I get an email from Mark, who's a client of mine, hypothetically. And I say, hey, Mark, sorry to hear about your concern. We'll take care of it right away. Let me introduce you to Ed. He's actually our new, quality control, guy, specialist, whatever, that we brought on recently. Let me connect the two of you. I'm sure he'll be able to figure it out. I'm here, if your problem still hasn't been resolved, please feel free to give me a call, whatever. But gradually, it's kind of, how do I pass that handoff and those relationships over to someone so that eventually Mark, don't take this the wrong way, but hopefully they eventually forget about Mark and they start falling in love with Ed, right? Because he's taking care of my problem. And in most service-related companies, as you guys probably all know, because my understanding is you've owned businesses in that sector and you've sold them, is that unfortunately you can do 99% fantastic job, but when are you typically getting contacted, right? That 1%, right? You missed, one of your people forgot to wipe down the sink, right, in our kitchen area. And so you really need to be on top of, obviously, making sure your clients' issues are getting resolved. So that's the first one, is try to remove yourself from certain components of the business as much as you can, which is typically possible as long as you have good kind of staff backfilling behind you. The second one would be, we talked about kind of that recurring revenue component, right? If you have a client call you and say, hey, we just want a one-time, office clean or whatever that looks like, try to see what you could do to provide. And maybe, most of these clients probably, or businesses probably do. If you don't have some kind of package set up and some kind of pricing, whether it's once a quarter we come in and we do X, Y, and Z services, or even better, once a month, right? Or even better, once a week, depending on kind of the client's needs. Try to get that recurring revenue component set up. What we do when we market a business, we put together what we call the confidential business memorandum, right? And that's something that we share with prospective buyers who we've kind of vetted out, qualified them. They've signed our confidentiality agreement. Not until that point do they even know the name of the business or the exact location. But in that package, what's very important that I always try to provide is a blind customer list, right? So if you have 100 different customers, I'll list kind of the city that they're located in, the type of building, right? That, whether it's an office or, like I said, more of a industrial or commercial building, whatever. And, put on there, hey, here's the monthly kind of recurring revenue. Here's the services that we're doing for them. This is the frequency that we're visiting them. Buyers really want to see that. So that would be the second thing, would be try to do what you can to make your revenue more of a recurring revenue. The third one I think is kind of obvious. Just make sure you have your books in order, right? If you don't have a good bookkeeper, hire one. I think if you find a good one, it's worth every dime, so that that doesn't take your focus as the owner, off of the business and the more kind of high priority tasks. Hire someone good to take care of your financials and your books. I think that's about it. That's really the top three. And then the other one's going to hopefully naturally come as you provide a good service and run a well-oiled business. And that is the multiple of your business when you do end up going to sell is going to be heavily influenced based on, two things: your involvement in the business, and second of all, what is that bottom line, profit or EBITDA of the business. At the end of the day, that's what a buyer wants to know when they're looking at your business, is how much are they asking for the business and how long is it going to take me to recoup my investment, right? And what is kind of my perceived risk of when I take over as the new owner? What is going to be any potential attrition or any fallout as we kind of look at that transfer of ownership? So yeah, those are a few things that hopefully will be helpful for any listeners who are kind of thinking, 3, 4, 5 years, out from selling.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's great advice. And we've all heard the term. Sometimes it's very cliche and I hear it too often, right? But you should be working on your business, not in your business, right? And I think that's easier said than done, especially for an owner who's only been in business for 2 or 3 years. You need to start generating enough revenue, first of all, before you actually have the money, unless you have seed money or some kind of investors, right? In order to have it justify bringing on a good, manager, GM, where, depending on kind of where you live, obviously in the country, that person may be a $50,000 a year salary, or maybe it's a $200,000 salary to find kind of a very good right-hand person, right? And so until you have those accounts and you've kind of pounded the pavement for however long it takes you, it's not easy just to be able to bring on a salary, but yeah, I think that should be the goal. Work on your business more than you are working in your business once you get to that size.
I had a number of companies. I did several times. And the one that was most successful was the one that I knew I was going to sell the day I started it. I knew. Just some of the differences was super clean books. No funny business on the books, unlike the previous ones. That seemed to work out very well. And I advise people to be thinking about the exit. It's inevitable one way or the other, like you had mentioned earlier.
What kind of multiples are you seeing, Dylan, on, let's say, 2 million to that 20 million sweet spot on the EBITDA? What kind of, if I'm going to go out and buy a business today, what would I have to expect? And let's just assume they're operating well, things are in order, books are in order, and I'm looking to grow through acquisition. What kind of EBITDA are you seeing out in the market right now for the building service contractors? The multiple.
Yeah, so the multiple, yeah, I know what you meant. It's fine. I can't speak to, and maybe you said 2 to 20 million in EBITDA. If that's the case, I can't speak to that.
I'm sorry, the EBITDA for a business.
In revenue. Okay. I've never touched a business that's doing 20 million in EBITDA. That's really kind of that next level, the space I don't specialize in.
And a million figure 100,000 of EBITDA, maybe 150, 10%.
Yeah, like I said, we kind of already addressed what are the main driving factors for that multiple, right? We talked about, what is the EBITDA? The higher the EBITDA, that's going to be the higher the multiple. Less owner involvement in the business, the higher the multiple. More recurring revenue in the business, the higher the multiple. What I've seen, Mark, is, and maybe we kind of break it down, right? I mean, if you have a business where it's very much an owner operator, and let's say the EBITDA is $100,000 a year, right? So it's not a bad company, right? Obviously making 100, and once again, it depends on where you live, right? You live in New York City, you're barely going to be able to pay your rent probably with $100,000 a year. You live in, Alabama, I don't know. I live in California, so it's hard to compare. We're kind of on that higher end of cost of living as well. But let's say it's 100,000 and we're considering that kind of a smaller business, right? Something like that where you have a very hands-on owner operator that, the business requires them to be there. Essentially a buyer in that scenario, they're looking to buy themselves a job, right? They're looking to, buy Ed's business and work 40 hours a week and they're going to make $100,000 a year, right? That's going to be their primary income, I would imagine, in most situations. Something like that, you're probably going to be looking at about a 2 multiple. So you probably wouldn't be selling for much more than $200,000. But then if you get another business that's been around for 20 years and you have a very well-diversified customer base of 100 or more kind of recurring revenue customers, and you've got a good GM in place, you've got 2 or 3 estimators in place, and you've got 50 different people out there who are actually doing the actual manual labor, and you're netting $500,000 a year. Now that's a lot more appealing, obviously, right? And now you get a lot more eyeballs from buyers looking at that opportunity because it's a lot more desirable. Of course, the price is going to be more, but it's more desirable. For something like that, you'd probably be looking at, in the cleaning industry, you'd be looking at something more in the 3 to 5 times, multiple on EBITDA. So really there's a big range. And what I always tell sellers is doing a business valuation and understanding you need to understand the market, right? Oftentimes I talk with business owners, they talk to me, the valuation comes in that I present to them and they say, wow, my CPA told me, right, it should sell for an 8 times multiple, right? And sometimes I need to bring them down, just be honest with them and say, hey, look, I'm not a CPA. I don't know if they're basing their valuation off of book value or how they came up with that number. And I'm not trying to discredit them and say that they're an idiot. They have no idea what they're talking about. But the bottom line is I think it's important in any profession that we all stay kind of in our lane, right? What do we do best? And I explained to them that I talk with different buyers on different types of businesses, different industries, primarily that service kind of world, day in and day out. And I'm very familiar with what other businesses are out there on the market, what buyers are willing to pay and why. And when I look at your business, the business is only worth what a buyer is willing to pay for it, right? We've all heard that. So at the end of the day, we're wasting our time trying to list it at a 6 or 7 multiple when I know that I'm not going to find a buyer who's going to be willing to pay more than a 3 multiple. And so, that range varies very much. But hopefully that answered your question and provided a little insight, Mark.
On valuation, I remember when I sold my business, which was a decade ago now, and we were in today's dollars about 15 million. And we're done all the work. I'd been on the market a couple times, thought I could sell this thing, thought I knew what it was worth. When they came back and told me it was worth $500,000 less than I had expected to get for it, I was a little unhappy. But on the other side, to your point, realized I think every business owner, let's use the 80-20 rule so I'm safe. 80% of business owners have no idea what the value of their business actually is when they go to market, unless they've done it before. And I think you're going to be surprised that an expert like you is going to tell them, look, here's what they look at, here's what the market bears, and here's what someone's going to pay, and that's what you're going to get. So, I mean, would you agree people have to be ready for a little shock when they get their valuation to market?
Yeah, that's a very good point because sometimes people like to compare it to a home sale, right? Which is just night and day. And I sold real estate for a few years before I got into business brokerage, 13 years ago. And even businesses within the same industry, Mark, there's almost no such thing as comparing apples to apples, right? Where if you're selling a home, anyone can hop on the MLS and, find out what my neighbor's home sold for and kind of get yourself in a ballpark. Whereas most business owners, especially once again, if they're first time sellers, which I would say probably 80% of my clients have never sold a business before, they really don't even have a baseline, better yet, any kind of comparable sales that they can even compare their business to. So in their mind, a lot of times people say, hey, if I could sell for $5 million, then I would consider selling. Well, if your business is only worth $3 million, do you really have the energy in the tank to put your foot back on the gas pedal, where in your mind, you're already thinking about selling? And maybe that's a conversation for a totally different interview, right? I would say it's 50-50, whether it's a shocker or whether it's not. I think for me, it's a good indicator of whether or not it's a good client I want to work with. If they say, okay, that makes sense. It's a little bit less than I was hoping for, but everything that you've shown me and explained to me as you've kind of presented this, valuation, it makes sense on why a buyer would be willing to pay that, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, it's interesting for me. I'm very much in a business. I tell my wife, I'm like, man, I should be billing for like psychology bills on the side because I'm such a psychologist and helping people really understand and come down to reality. So hopefully that answered your question, Mark.
It did. Thank you.
Dylan, could you maybe run through 2 or 3 bad scenarios that seem to be common where you've got a bad deal or a bad company? What mistakes have you seen that have torpedoed otherwise possible deals?
Yeah, good question. You kind of caught me off guard. One comes to mind, and so hopefully I come up with at least another one while I'm talking here. One that comes to mind is sellers who don't really understand the importance of confidentiality, right? There's different parties that we want to keep a sale confidential. For the most part, the most obvious one should be your employees. The hard thing about that is that if, a lot of people have employees, and you guys probably had this in your companies, where maybe you had someone who's been with you for 10 years or maybe 20 years, right? And so a seller says, man, are you sure, Dylan, I shouldn't let them in on what's going on, because I kind of feel like I'm keeping a secret from one of my best friends, right? And you guys probably experience that as well. My advice is, I know it's hard. You don't want to feel like you're being secretive, but there's so many things that can go wrong if those employees find out that the business is for sale, where the last thing we want is an employee finding out the business is for sale. And naturally in an employee's mind, they're thinking, man, I've loved working with Sharon over the past 10 years. What's going to happen now, right? And they start thinking the worst case scenarios. Maybe the new owner is going to be some man. I've liked working with Sharon because she's female. Maybe it's going to be some man who's some dictator, and he's going to come in and try to give me new tasks that I don't like doing. Or, I mean, maybe they're going to try to decrease my salary or shorten my vacation time, or, they start thinking the worst. So that's one thing. Is the last thing you want as we have the business on the market, or as we maybe already have it in escrow kind of going through the due diligence period, is you don't want employees putting out resumes looking for a new job because of the uncertainty of what the future holds for them now that they know that my boss is going to be selling his business. So that's one thing.
Sure.
Yeah. But it's easier said than done. And I get that, right? I get that. And to me, once again, that's a good sign when a business owner tells me, look, I don't like feeling like I'm keeping a secret, because to me, that tells me their integrity. That tells me they take good care of their people, that they don't want to kind of blind someone who they have this trusted kind of long-term relationship with. So once again, it's a good sign when I hear that, but I need to do my best. And in certain situations, I mean, granted, the sign manufacturing company that I just referenced that we just recently put into escrow, these particular buyers are going to be more of an investor, kind of more hands-off, buyer, where they're actually bringing in a GM candidate who's going to take over kind of the role of the current owner, who's an owner-operator. And for them, it's very important. This business in particular only has, I think, 6 employees. So it's a smaller company. I think they're doing maybe at 1.7 million a year in revenue, just to give you some context. And the buyers have identified really 2 out of those 6 employees who, if they lost them from day one, they would be in some trouble, right? One of those is kind of the key sign menu, the installer, right? And these are nice big signs. It's not like you're putting a placard on your door, right? These are big signs, and you need someone with experience, and they only have really that one installer who's very good. So, and then another one's their graphic design lady who's also good. But in that situation, that's a little bit different. If a buyer says, hey, look, it's very important to me that let's get through kind of our financial due diligence first in the transaction. But before we end up signing off on all of our due diligence release and our contingency releases, we really need to meet with those 2 employees just to make sure we get kind of a warm and fuzzy that they know that we want them to stay on. They know that we value them based on what the previous owners told us, all the good things about them. And they just want to get some kind of verbal commitment that, yeah, I'm happy with my job, right? I like what I'm doing, and I have no intention of leaving. But other than that, I strongly try to encourage business owners to keep this kind of between them and, obviously, if they have a spouse, right, a business partner, they know as well that they're looking at selling. So that would be one thing that you need to look out for. That helps a lot when it's a strategic or industry buyer who, they understand the business and they understand what they need to do to kind of keep that continuity. The only other thing that came to mind, Ed, in terms of kind of pitfalls or things that, sellers might do is take your foot off the gas pedal, right? A lot of times people think, okay, I've listed my business. In my mind, it's already sold, right? That's not the case. And so you need to continue to run your business, continue to, take on the new clients, take on the new jobs, and know that, the future buyer of your company is going to want to continue to see this as opposed to the downhill,
What I wanted to do was ask you, what would be 1, 2, or 3 things, maybe most important things that we want to leave with our listeners today?
The scrub down, a recap of what was covered on today's episode.
Yeah, I think the most important thing is that, if you're thinking of selling your business, don't wait too long, right? And I'm not the hard sales guy that if someone comes to me, it's like, I'm so excited. And I mean, maybe when you're new in my business, it's like you kind of take what you can get, right? You're excited for the experience. You're hungry for new opportunities. So I don't say this from a position of, I want to list your business, so you need to sell today, right? I say it from a very sincere and authentic position of having me kind of feel the heartache of having done a business valuation for someone today. Their business is trending upward. It's in a very strong position to sell and take to market. And they tell me, yeah, I want to sell, but let's say it's a man, right? Yeah, my wife retires in 2 years from her job. And so our plan is we can start taking Social Security and I want to sell it then, right? What I tell them now is, hey, look, I think that's a good plan. And I'm not going to try to have you kind of, fast forward or rush your sale. But here's the reality of what I've seen too many times. A business is positioned for sale. You wait 2 years. Most people kind of start taking their foot off the gas pedal a little bit. Now your business is not doing this. It's doing this. And that really is going to impact what a buyer thinks about your business when they see the downhill, right? They're not going to pay top dollar when they see your business going down. So that's really kind of my main advice, is that if your business is strongly positioned to sell, I'd say get a valuation done, right? I don't charge anything for a business valuation. And who knows, maybe the number will surprise you, right? If you're one of those business owners who has no idea in terms of kind of what the baseline multiples are, valuation, maybe you'll be happy with the valuation and maybe that 2 years will turn into 2 months, right? Just don't wait too long. Once you start feeling, kind of that I'm falling out of love with my business, I wake up Monday morning and it's like, oh man, I have another 5 days ahead of me to deal with all the headaches, right? I think that's a really good kind of gut indicator of, hey, I should probably do something now before we start losing clients and things start trending down.
Would you come back again, Dylan?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Good questions. I know we're short on time, and I'm sure not too many listeners want to hear a 2-hour conversation all at once. So let's do it again. That'd be great, guys.
Before we leave, give us your company name, how people can find you if they're interested. And I like your guarantee. You don't get paid unless they do. So
yeah,
it's pretty sure. So what do we got, Dylan?
Well, thanks for that. The name of my company is SD Business Advisors. We're based here in San Diego, but we sell companies nationwide. Like I mentioned, I specialize really kind of in the service sector across a variety of different industries. So if you're interested in chatting, learning more about the process, hopefully you've sensed kind of on this call, my demeanor, my temperament is very low key. It's very educational. I take on a very advisory, consultative role. So there's no obligation to pick up the phone and call me and let's do a 10, 15 minute, Q&A and see where it goes.
We'll put all the contact info will be with this presentation. Absolutely.
All right. Perfect.
Absolutely.
All right, guys,
Cool.
Thank you for your time. And
Thank
we
you.
will see you in the next episode.
All
Thank
right.
you very,
Take
very
care,
much.
guys. Thank
Bye-bye.
you. You're welcome. Bye.